Mr. and Mrs. Smith were a happy young couple. They started dating young, and eventually it led to marriage. Years went by, and it was still Mr. and Mrs. Smith alone in their big house, and Mrs. Smith was not happy about this. She wanted a child. They tried and tried to conceive, but nothing would happen. Miss Smith was devastated. She wanted a baby and didn't want to wait any longer. She read in a magazine about in vitro fertilization, and then she got very excited. It took several tries, but finally the implantation was a success. They finally had the baby they had dreamed of for so long. Mrs. Smith was ecstatic about finally having her baby, but she knew that eventually she would want more, so she told the in vitro clinic to store the rest of her fertilized eggs for future use. The Smith family was living their dream with their new baby until the unimaginable happened. They were killed in a horrific car accident. Their immediate family was devastated about having lost both of them at once, and now the poor baby was an orphan. A couple years went by and the IVF clinic tried to contact the Smiths about non-payment of their embryo storage and what they wanted to do with the frozen eggs, but they were unable to reach them. This is when the IVF clinic learned of the tragic accident that Mr. and Mrs. Smith had been in, and now understood why the bill had been left unpaid. This is also where the story hits a fork in the road. The big dilemma here is what should happen to the frozen embryos. Are they tiny little frozen people? Are they no more than excess of a project that should be discarded? Or are they tiny little pieces of frozen gold to a Parkinson's disease researcher? Something that could potentially be the cure to a horrible disease. By the end of this slideshow, the class will state the major options open to supernumerary embryos and what their outcomes are. There are three main options for embryos that are no longer wanted or needed by a couple for implantation. Option number 1. They can be adopted by other couples. In this scenario, the frozen eggs would be given to another couple that could not conceive so that they could have a child as well. Out of all the possible outcomes, this is the only scenario that would result in the fertilized egg getting a chance at life and becoming a child. However, in a recent survey by Moutel, Greg, Meningod, and Herve, done using 17 embryo storage units in France, it was shown that only 9.1% of couples that had extra embryos frozen would donate them to another couple who could not fertilize their own eggs for whatever reason. Option number 2. The eggs will be destroyed. It is as simple as that. The eggs would be discarded and disposed of by the IVF clinic. In a survey of 1,246 individuals by Moutel, Greg, Meningod, and Herve, it is shown that 89.5% of the couples would prefer to have their embryos destroyed as opposed to any of the other options. Option number 3. The eggs could be given to stem cell researchers. Stem cell research uses the embryos to work towards finding cures for some of the most debilitating diseases known to man. The eggs would eventually be destroyed, but in the process, help further research in these fields. Only about 10% of the individuals in the case study revealed that they would consider donating to stem cell research. By the end of this slideshow, the class will state why teaching and informing on supernumerary embryos at the time of implantation is important. Remember the figures from earlier? 89.5% of the couples would rather have their eggs destroyed as to anything else. The other two options helped others, but they would rather just throw them away. I wonder how many of those people knew all of their options. A study was conducted with 508 participants, all of who had extra frozen embryos left behind. In this study of 508 people done by human embryonic stem cell coordinators, 353 people said that they had interest in donating their extra embryos to stem cell research. All 508 of those people had been given a leaflet on stem cell research in the beginning of their journey with the IVF clinic. In this same study, a nurse researcher participated, and out of all the people that requested more information on what they could do with their unwanted embryos, 87% of them decided to donate them to stem cell research. The Smiths were so excited about finally getting pregnant that they were not thinking of the extra embryos at all. No one at the IVF clinic had told them of the different options, but if they had, Maybe they would have left instructions with the clinic should something ever happen to them. By the end of this slideshow, the class will state some key pros and cons on stem cell research. Stem cell research holds great promise for curing some of the nastiest of diseases. It holds some of the only sources of hope for people affected by incurable diseases like cancer and some neurological disorders. It has a tremendous application in various fields including human welfare and veterinary science. Totipotent embryonic stem cells provide a powerful tool for the studies of early embryonic development, gene targeting, cloning, transgenic animal production, gene therapy, and regenerative medicine drug designing. Because of this potential use for targeted manipulation, isolation of embryonic stem cells could treat diseases like Alzheimer's, diabetes, cancer, stroke, and many others. It could be used to screen medications in a much quicker way than we can now, giving researchers the ability to get new, more effective treatments on the market faster. On the other hand, a vast range of people consider the frozen embryos as life. Research eventually results in the destruction of the embryo, therefore killing a potential human being. The potential of that egg to turn into a baby warrants a lot of argument of its worth as a person, not just cells. People see the destruction of embryos, like abortion of fetuses, as murder, as a sacrifice of the weak for the interest of others. These people feel that no matter what the outcome, or how many people it will save in the long run, it is still murder, even if the embryos were to be destroyed anyway. Mr. and Mrs. Smith did not get a decision in what happened to their embryos. Had they been given more information in the beginning about the 3 major options left to unwanted embryos, and about the benefits of stem cell research, they might have left instructions with the clinic of what to do with their frozen embryos if something were to happen to them. According to Stanford University, a clinic does not have an ethical obligation to store embryos indefinitely. A couple who has given no written instruction for the disposal of the embryos cannot claim injury if the clinic treats them as abandoned and disposes of them. In this case, since the Smiths were dead, their decision was made for them. The clinic donated their embryos to the director of a research team using stem cells to try to find a cure for Parkinson's disease. Was the clinic ethical in their decision? We say yes. It is staggering to see that if left uninformed, almost 90% of the people would rather throw that little piece of research gold into the trash, rather than using it for helping millions of people if the researchers find a cure using stem cells. Is it a person? Maybe. But either way, it will be destroyed. It can't feel pain or feel like it is being mistreated. So why not help people out? So now that you have some basic information, what would you do?